So, hi, I'm Steve Hassan, and I have a very special guest with me all the way from Hollywood, Jerry Miner. Thanks,
Blue line.
Jerry, for agreeing to talk with me today.
No problem. Anytime.
And I want to tell listeners and viewers, Jerry is a star. He's an actor. He's a comedian. He's on Saturday Night Live. He's a great guy. But the reason that we're doing this video has to do with you are being raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
And so why don't you share a little bit about life growing up in the Witnesses and how you came to leave it, and then we can
Okay.
get into how we know each other.
Well, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness from the age of 7 years old. My mother, who was divorced from my dad, came into contact with the Witnesses and became one when I was about 7 years old. So from then on, I was taught everything that the religion had to offer, until I became baptized at around the age of 18, right after my 18th birthday. And I became one full-fledged member myself.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I'll talk about my understanding of the whole experience before I
Yeah,
talk to you, and then I'll talk about it after.
cool.
Um, so my thoughts about being raised in that environment then was I should also say that I was disfellowshipped, which means that I was kicked out. I don't know what a lot of the other terms you can use. Scientology uses the term
Excommunicated, disconnection, or a couple of
disconnection,
terms, right?
right? Which means that you are no longer a member of the organization, of the religion, of the group. But it also means that in Jehovah's Witnesses terms that those that are inside the group are no longer allowed to contact you. They're not supposed to talk to you.
Shun you because you have cooties.
Yes, yeah, yes, yes. You're worse than an unbeliever. It means you've rejected whatever the religion had to offer, and that is worse than a person who doesn't.
Yeah, and there's so many cults that do that practice as a form of social control,
Yes.
emotional control, behavioral control, etc.
So then, after I was kicked out, my relationship with my mother pretty much ended,
Mm.
and stayed that way for 30 years. And so that was the state that I was in before I contacted Steve. I think my opinion of the group was something that I held close to myself. I had my own opinion, but I just wasn't sure. There wasn't a lot of writing about it. I couldn't find a lot of information. Obviously, with the information age that we're in now, and the internet afforded me a lot more information that I wasn't able to get as I was growing up. And after I left at the age of uh, 19, 20, around that age. So
Hmm.
I wasn't a full-fledged member very long,
Hmm.
about a year, 2 years.
Hmm.
Um, After I left, there was a lot of information about the group. And
Hmm.
so I thought I had my own opinions about it. I felt like it was a highly controlled situation.
Right.
Um, I was familiar with what I thought were groups that were similar, and
Hmm.
even while I was in the group, while I was Jehovah's Witness, the Jonestown massacre happened, and
Mm.
I remember thinking back then, was my group somewhat like this? Did it
Hmm.
have some of the same types of problems? And then after I left, I was convinced,
Mm.
actually myself, but I didn't find a lot of information about that it
Right.
linked the two groups. And obviously, when I was in the group, we told ourselves, or I was told, that we were nothing like a group like that. We weren't a
Of
cult.
course.
They didn't like the word cult.
Right.
That was definitely a pejorative, and so they didn't think of themselves that way. And so, um, but I had my own opinion after I left, and my opinion was shaped by the way I was treated when I left.
Right.
When I was disfellowshipped, I was young, depressed. I was suicidal. I actually tried to commit suicide,
Mm.
and I felt like I was completely cast aside. But I also felt like there weren't a lot of options outside, even that understood my
Right.
whole plan.
Right.
I didn't know anybody else
Hmm.
who at that time who had been a Jehovah's Witness, and maybe I'd meet people every once in a while that had grown up like I had, but I hadn't met anybody who had been disfellowshipped like I had. You know,
Uh-huh.
I met other people who'd grown up in it, and I would often talk to them about the situation, and it often had a negative feeling about it. That people didn't
Sure.
know how they felt about their experience growing up in
Right.
a group like that.
Right. And I can just jump in and say that as a mental health professional, folks that have been kicked out of their group, whether they were asking critical questions or they would, fell in love with someone or kissed the girl or a
Mm-hmm.
boy or something, or celebrated a birthday, or
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get a blood transfusion. It's the folks that were kicked out that have the most serious psychological effects. So
Mm-hmm.
the feeling suicidal, because
Sure.
you're trained to think that life exists with God in the group. And then if you're no longer okay to be in the group, then what's the purpose of living? That
Yes.
kind of binary all or nothing thinking is very common.
Very common.
So is it fair to say you came across my book somehow, or share the story?
I did, and like I said, the information age, I was on the internet, and then always looking at things, that had to do with my experience, and looking for things, and specifically about my experience, about people who had left,
Right.
and what were the effects on them, what were the psychological effects, and like I said, I wasn't finding a lot of things, but I
Hmm.
also had an aversion to people who were in the group and maybe writing about their experience, people who we considered when I was in the group apostates.
Oh, you're
Um,
programmed against ex-members. They
yes.
have super cooties.
Yes. And so I think my feeling at the time, or what I would have told myself, is that I didn't want anything biased. I wanted something that was more objective,
Yeah.
in this opinion. I didn't. Afterwards, I thought, well, what was holding me back from looking at something that was negative? I've seen the positive. Why can't I just see what the
Right.
opinion was? Um, but I came across your book because it didn't mention anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. And at the time, I had already put in my mind that my group was a lot like Scientologist, or a lot like the Jonestown group.
Right.
So I was putting it together. So I wanted to see if anybody else had made this connection like I had.
Yeah.
And
So this guy who was in the moon cult was safe. Safe.
this guy, this guy was writing this book about different groups, and my group that I was in wasn't mentioned. So it was easy for me to look at everything about those groups and look at it in a way that I considered objectively, because you weren't
Right.
talking about the group that I was in.
And you
And I,
looked at the book, the version of the book um, previous to my buying the rights back in 2014, because the newer one I put them in.
that's right.
I told the story of two ex-members, so they're actually in the new edition
I
of
think that
Combating Cult
at
Language.
the, I believe that was around 2014.
Uh-huh.
So it was right at the time you may have been putting that together or putting it
Yeah, the
out.
new one came out 2015. I bought
Right.
the rights back in we added about 80 pages. We did a lot on Scientology. I added the
That's right.
Mormons,
Hmm.
Jehovah's Witnesses,
Hmm.
trafficking and terrorist groups. So it was a big
Yes.
update.
Yes.
But so you read the book, and then, as I remember, what you?
Read the book. I looked you up. Actually, it was on tape. I listened to the book, which was really good because I was able to listen to it, a lot, and pick up parts. I think it was a
Oh,
lot
so you have
easier
the
for me.
audio tape, the abridged audio tape.
I did. It was online. Somebody put it online.
Uh, pirate.
Legally, yes.
Funny, because I
uh,
just I just hired someone to actually read the entire new edition, so it's on Audible and it's legal for people who don't like to read physical books but want to listen.
I mean, it helped me out. I'm a podcast person. I like listening to things like that. I can
Too.
doing other
I like
things.
listening.
And that was great for me. It was things where I could rewind, I could go back and say, hey, that was a lot like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Let me hear that again.
Got
You
it.
know.
Interesting.
And so after I listened to the book, I looked you up. So who is this guy? Has he written anything else? And I saw that you had a practice, and I called you and asked you hey, what do you do in your practice? And he said, well, I work with people a lot like yourself. And I asked you, I think, about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And you said, well, yes, a lot of people have asked me about that. And yes, I am writing about that actually as we speak.
Right.
I think that, and the thing that I got from you the most, because I did ended up coming to see you in Massachusetts. And I'm a person that could do that. I had the time. I'm an actor, so I'm not. I don't have to go to work every day. I could block out an amount of time. And the reason I did it was because, and I tell the story a lot. There's a guy, Mark Maron, who does a podcast. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. He's a friend of mine, and we run in the same circles. He's a comedian like I am. And this was very early on in his podcast, and he asked me to come on because I had mentioned at one point that I was a former Jehovah's Witness. And he said, oh, my neighbor's one. I was wondering about this because I'm always trying to talk to this guy, and he won't talk to me.
Uh-huh.
So will you come on my podcast, and will you talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing he knew at that time is that they didn't celebrate Christmas. And so I came on and talked to him about it. And I remember the uncomfortableness of him when he asked me. I'm like,
Right.
and I thought to myself, and this was, I think, around the time that I was reading your book at the same time.
Right.
And I was asking myself, why am I scared of this?
Yeah.
And I'm looking in your book, and you were talking about phobias and things that may be still affecting you after you leave the group. And I was already wondering,
Right.
the problems I have in relationships, the anxiety that I feel all the time,
Yeah.
how much of that is linked to my experience in this. Now, I had a suicide attempt, and so I should have known that there was a lot of trauma involved in this experience, but I wasn't thinking of it that way. Actually, after I saw you, it really opened my eyes a lot. And actually, after the podcast, I listened to it, and it started to make it clear to me that, yeah, maybe there's some things that are affected by me. I'm afraid of certain things. I was afraid to talk to you.
Yeah.
I was afraid that you might be biased.
Yep.
And then I started to think about other things and notice other things in my life that those fears may have been carried on. So,
Right. I'd like to just jump in again, if I may, Jerry, and say that it's a standard with these groups to make people falsely believe, that the group is perfect, God is perfect, the ideology is perfect. So if there's any problems, it's you. Your sin, you're not committed, it's bad karma, depending on the different type of cult. It's always you. So when somebody gets physically out of the group, they still are thinking, what's wrong with me?
yes.
I'm feeling like crap. I'm scared. It's not what did they do to me? What did the group install in my head that if I had had a normal childhood would never be there? So it's that shift that I help my clients understand, that you're a good person and it was an aberrant environment and a totalist cult group that was installing these irrational fears, making you feel guilty all the time, creating standards that were not humanly possible, so that you always feel guilt or shame. Corporal punishment in the Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups, that is child abuse, and in terms of all the research that I've read. But so you had the time, but you were putting it together. You're super intelligent, and you said, let me confront my fears. Like, if I'm afraid to meet this guy, Steve, but why don't I just do it and see what I learn? And we worked intensively, as I remember, and it was just a lot of education, but connecting the dots with your personal story. So you were able to tell stories of your childhood that you had never perhaps talked about before. And then we basically processed them to help you really see what, how destructive a lot of the treatment had been to you personally, in terms of your self-esteem and your ability to trust yourself, in terms of a relationship, for example.
I want to tell people too, and especially people who, and Jehovah's Witnesses have the same type of, not the same type, but a lot of times in these groups, people may have an aversion to getting help like this,
Mhm.
because another one of the fears that's been instilled in them is that a lot of professionals are people who are either controlled by Satan or controlled by whatever evil forces are out there or whatever we're against.
Right.
You know, that those are the type of people that may be trying to control you.
Right.
And so a lot of people have that fear that if they go seek some kind of professional help, that person may get them into another kind of controlling relationship.
Right.
And that is, and also coming out of a controlling relationship, that is a valid fear, I think, for people.
Absolutely. And what I say to, potential clients is I want to educate you about what is mind control so that you can have a toolbox to assess for yourself specific red flag behaviors and techniques.
That's
And so
exactly what I was going to say.
my whole approach is about empowering people to reclaim their personal power, to have an internal locus of control for their life. And the last person on earth, me, would be trying to make you believe what I believe,
Hmm.
and make you dependent and obedient on me. I'm like free thinking, like be yourself, follow
Yes.
your path, follow your passion, follow your inner conscience and guide.
I will tell people, I asked you, I believe I may have asked you, but you made clear to me what your therapy entails. So
Hmm.
before I went, and so I asked you, what do you do? And you said, basically, I'm going to tell you everything that I know. And that's what you did. So for a week, you told me everything that I needed to know. So for people that may think that it's some type of, that this therapy is, I don't know, it's some hypnotic kind of mind. It's not that. All you did was give me pretty much a lot of information. A
Yeah.
lot of information.
So I'm glad you brought up the hypnosis thing because I'm actually highly trained in hypnosis, but I don't deliberately want to do hypnotherapy with clients, but I explain what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I demystify it. I show videos. Like I like showing some things by Darren Brown to
Mm-hmm.
show how he's manipulating people and what to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
Confusion techniques, distraction techniques, embedded commands, all kinds of things like that. But fear is a good thing. It keeps you safe, except if it's overactive and it isn't guided by wisdom and intelligence. Because there are some things that are genuinely a threat and are dangerous, and there are some things that are just residual fears left over from the cult, like talking to an ex-member or thinking that someone, like Scientology does one of the most thorough phobia indoctrinations against any mental health professional. They think I'm going to electroshock them or give them drugs. I can't even prescribe drugs, but they have all these incredible fears that have been installed in their mind because Hubbard wanted everyone to go to him
Mm-hmm.
and to Scientology for cures, even though he doesn't cure a thing, he makes bigger problems. But again, it's getting mastery over how does the mind work,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how to discern ethical influence and unethical influence, empowering people to have valid choice in their life. And one of the patterns that I do a lot with my clients is a uh, reintegration technique where I ask if you knew then what you know now, like
Mm-hmm.
if you go back to when you were being disfellowshipped,
Mm-hmm.
if you go back to then knowing what you know now, how would you have wanted to behave differently? Like, what would you have said? How would you have acted differently? And then just like leave it to you to go, I definitely wouldn't have felt guilty. I definitely would have spoken out louder. I probably would have gotten up in front of the entire congregation and said, hey, this is a mind control cult. They control behavior,
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, and emotions. Or you think you're following the Bible, but you're not. Like there's so many mistranslations, whatever. But people get to use their imagination to reinvigorate them.
Mm-hmm.
in that key moment where it was being interpreted as, oh, I'm no good. But now it's like, no, I want to leave this group. Like, this is a very positive thing for me,
Yes.
leave the group. And by interpreting your own personal history and creating some new neuronal, connections, it shifts everything that came afterward.
Mm-hmm.
So you can then revisit some failed relationships or some other key moments and go, well, if I knew then what I knew now, and you can again restore and repair oneself. It's a very powerful strategy.
So can I talk about my life since then?
Please,
So,
please, absolutely.
you know, I think I couldn't have predicted the changes that are in my life now. I couldn't have predicted changes that are in my personality. I really couldn't. I was looking for that. I was looking for healing, but it came in much different way than I thought. There's nothing magical. I
Mm-hmm.
still have the same problems that I had when I had them. But I can tell you something that my anxiety, well, physically, my anxiety is much better to the point where I feel like it isn't anywhere the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I get anxious at certain things, but
Everybody gets anxious, Jerry. It's a good thing.
I have the
When it
regular
gets
normal
toxic
things.
levels where you get paralyzed, that's where it's bad.
Well, when I didn't know where it was coming from,
Right.
one of those things. So
Yeah.
I have that. And, just my relationships, I talked about that. I had good relationships. I felt like I had a good, fulfilling life before I saw you. I really did.
Okay.
I have a successful life. I love my job, my work. I found something that I love to do,
Yeah.
but I can say that it's much richer now. It's something that I can't even imagine. I'm a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing that I am is nicer, nicer to people around me. I think it's just being more trusting.
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability to trust people more, to look at that experience and see it for what it was, and that can making sense out of that experience has been able to help me to trust, to know that people make mistakes, to know that people are misled, to
Yes.
know that this is a phenomenon, and it wasn't just my group, but there are a lot of other groups that are out there. They're going through a lot of the same type of things, and I've been able to meet people
Yeah.
who weren't just in the group that I was in, who have the same type of experience, who have the same emotions, the same thoughts. So I can say that my life is much richer and a much. I'm living a much better life now that
Mm-hmm.
I've seen, and I wasn't living a bad life. I
Right. No, I know you're very successful. But correct me if I'm misremembering, but I believe you had said something like in your professional life prior to reading my book and such, you would kind of not go out of your way to tell people you were in the witnesses. You would
Yeah,
just
like I said, when Mark came to me, for the podcast, I was taken aback, and that's why I started to ask myself, why am I ashamed of this? Why am I ashamed of
right,
this experience? There's other things that I've done I'm not ashamed of at all. What is it about this experience that I'm afraid of?
right.
Uh, and and it was just all the fear and phobias and everything that went along with that, and also just not being able to make sense of it. Just not
Right.
what happened.
Right. And now you've agreed to do this. I think you're the first former client of mine who said, no, no,
Oh,
no,
really?
I want to tell people about this, that you want to do a podcast,
Mhm.
you want to spread the word and reduce stigma if for people who were raised in cult groups and such or were recruited into them. And you want to educate the public and make others, feel better.
Well, I mean, and you can say this, and you've said this to me before. As far as the research and the knowledge that we know about groups like this, it really is very thin. You're one of the only people that I know, and obviously there are other professionals that are out there doing this work, but it's at the baby stages as far as I'm concerned, and I think you would say that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Although it's in the the Diagnostic Manual of the American Psychiatric Association as a dissociative disorder, the legal system still doesn't recognize undue influence, a la brainwashing, mind control, and hypnosis as a tool to make people believe things that they ordinarily wouldn't choose to believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are a lot of powerful, wealthy groups that don't want the public to know about this stuff.
Sure.
And there are also intelligence agencies, the US's and other foreign governments' intelligence agencies that want an ignorant public, because an informed citizenry where they understand the difference between facts and lies and tools of critical thinking of, oh, you're making this claim, where's the evidence? Let's see credible proof. Otherwise,
Sure.
make these conspiracy ridiculous claims.
Well, Steve, on the other side of that too, a lot of these groups are banned in countries that are more totalitarian because they take them away from the central government. So
like China and Russia in particular are the most notable ones, but I'd say that China and Russia are acting like mind control
groups, right.
North Korea. So they don't want any competition.
Exactly.
They want everybody just thinking one way.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually I'm in the middle of reading Robert Lifton, who is you would say a mentor of yours.
Totally. This book helped me.
And that's kind of where you came up with the bite model, right?
Yes.
From his studies, and making it kind of simpler where we can all understand it. And to bring that all together, I want to talk about this special that's coming up, or as we're taping this, it's coming up. I think when you put this out, it'll be already aired. Leah Remini is doing a special about Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, we know that she's already done 2 seasons about the group that she was in, Scientology.
Right.
But as this research is being done, as other former members are reaching out and talking about their experiences, we're talking to each other about our experiences. And so I can say that I'm going to be in this special that Leah Remini is doing about the Jehovah's Witnesses, where she's making this comparison to the group that she was in, the Scientologists.
Yeah, and this will be public after it airs, so we are not disclosing anything about you being on the show because people
But I think that there's commercials, you can see my face now, so I am talking a little bit about it.
Got it. Good.
Yeah. I don't want to say what's in it yet, but to people. But this we're already even aired. So if you happen to see that,
I want to see it.
Or if anybody out there is happy to see it, well, maybe that brought them here.
Yeah.
You can see that we have started to put these things together. You have introduced me to a lot of people that have been in different groups, and just talking to them on my own, I can see the similarities without even doing the research. And I think that is going to help a lot of people because people from different groups. I was able to see a lot more. Past all of the phobias that had been instilled in me by looking at another group.
Yeah, and as we all know, celebrities, Hoyt Richards is another friend of mine that's out in LA. People like yourself, people like him willing to speak about it, people like Leah willing to say, hey, I was in a cult, It's a mind control group. It's going to destigmatize it for the rest of the population. And hopefully more people will be willing to share, by the way, I grew up in this controlling church, or by the way, I grew up in this political cult or whatever.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people are ashamed, and just like me, they don't know why.
Yeah.
They don't even know why they're ashamed,
Yeah.
So hopefully when you see people talking about it, then can encourage you to talk about it, and it can take that kind of shame and that stigma away from it.
Yeah, so I want to thank you profoundly for being the great guy that you are, and being willing to speak out and educate people and say, hey, it's not you, the groups are really problematic. And if your life, if you're walking around with anxiety and fears and you don't know where they're coming from, and you were raised in one of these groups, or you were even in one of these groups for a few years, educate yourself. And then you did the next step, which was actually call me and then come to Boston, and I got to get, you basically picked my brain, as I remember. I have tons of, material and information, but you asked me what you wanted to know as I was going through the models and how I came to learn what I've learned.
Well,
So
thank you for helping me. And I encourage anybody to look forward to this kind of help as it comes out, and especially with Steve. And I think that you have a lot of options that you can give people, whether it's either reading your book, talking to you online, or actually coming to see you. I
yeah.
encourage people to do that,
Mm.
or seek some type of help. It really does help you, and seeking the kind of help that knows your experience, I think can really help you, no matter how far you may be away from that experience.
Yeah, and I do think there's a benefit to having been in a cult myself, but there are lots of good therapists who haven't been in cults, but they've taken the time to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And the practice and the exposure is critical. So I'm gonna sign off, but thank
Okay,
you,
that's it.
family.
Oh, I'll
Go
say
ahead.
one more thing too. A lot of
Sure.
people are separated from their families, and I would say, in
Yes.
my experience, what you gave me, and it wasn't something that I came to you looking for. You encouraged me to have contact with my family that are still in the group, and I have done that. And so now that's another thing that I have that I didn't think would ever happen, is that I've been able to establish some kind of contact with family members who are still in. So I was not encouraged to go away from him. Actually, Steve encouraged me to come together with my family, so it's helped us to come together.
Yeah,
So,
that's great point because a lot of people, when they come out, they go, well, I've been shunned, so
mhm,
that means I can't talk to them, but it's not true. They can't talk to you, but you can talk to them.
that is
So,
true.
you can send letters, postcards, just say, I miss you, I love you, I wish I could hug you. They're not allowed to respond, but they're thinking of you if you
Yes,
contact them. And so I have a whole book, Freedom of Mind, on how to reach out to people that you care about that are still entrapped.
it's
And I do
possible to repair.
yeah, and I think that love is stronger than mind control. If you're coming from a genuine, caring place,
Hmm.
respectful place, not a name calling place, and not attacking the group kind of place, but just I miss you. Wish we could, sit down, share some tea or coffee together. And I'd like to share things that are going on with my life with you and find out what's going on with you. Just these little baby steps can open doors.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well,
Thanks.
bringing families back together, that's what we're trying to do. So,
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Jerry Minor.
thank you so much.
Man,
You
thanks.
too. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.